Welcome to Indie Spotlight, where I, your host Sizer, have a heart-to-heart with independent and small tabletop RPG developers. With episode 1 under our belts, we have quickly begotten a reputation for being the most electric podcast on the internet. As such, we are starting with a lightning round. So guest, what is your name, please?
My name is Neil, and my pronouns are he, him.
Thank you. Where do you live, King?
I live in Dublin, in Ireland.
Gotcha. What kind of creative are you?
Um, Overworked and underpaid.
Yeah, that's fair. isn't that the usual case though, right? Aren't
Yeah,
we
yeah,
all?
it's all of us.
But would you say that you are perhaps a game developer and actual play GM?
Yeah, I mean, I do actual play, but like my passion is game design and development. I've been designing my own indie tabletop system, although that's not what tonight's interview is about, but it is related to tonight's topic, and that
Sure.
project is called FeyEarth, an indie ttrpg set in an alternate 19th century Earth where all the creatures from folklore and fairy tale are real, have always been real, and live alongside humanity. And that's a labor of love I've been working on for about a decade now, and I had a Kickstarter for that last year, which managed to raise the money I need to physically publish the hardback core rulebook for that system.
Mm-hmm.
So, so
And I,
that's I do actual play, but all of the actual play that I do is to promote my game, my system, FeyEarth.
I gotcha. Now, concerning what we're talking about today, though, that is related to Fair. So, what is the name of the project that we're talking about today?
So today's project is called Hidden Folk of the Feywild. And what this is a bestiary supplement for 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. So just quickly to describe what FeyEarth is, because it's related to this, and what sets it apart from other TTRPGs. As I said, it's a 19th century alternate Earth in which the Fey have always lived openly alongside humanity. So it's a world where you have the Industrial Revolution, but you also have Magitech, you have some humans who are spellcasters, and incredibly powerful magical creatures. Because what makes FeyEarth really, really, really unique compared to, I will faithfully say, any other TTRPG I've ever seen, including Vesson, which is an amazing game, but still, is
Mm-hmm.
that all of the Fey in FeyEarth have been depicted as accurately and authentically as I can based on the descriptions in their original folklore.
And I'm
I've
gonna.
spent I've spent 10 years researching European folklore specifically to write this. Like, I joke with my friends at this stage, I could probably write at least half a master's thesis on folklore. I have done that much research. So that's what makes FeyEarth so unique. And I decided, well, even if you don't want to play my game, why not have some amazing, authentic magic in your game? And that's what Hidden Folk of the Feywild is, where I've basically taken about 70, 80 creatures from FeyEarth. These are all Fey and magical creatures. None of them are made up by me. I didn't invent any of these creatures. All of these creatures come from folklore. These come from stories that were shared for centuries around fireplaces across Europe, and I mean across all of Europe. This isn't just Irish folklore. This is pan-European, all the way from Ireland and Iceland to our most easterly Slavic borders. And with Hidden Folk of the Feywild, I've basically taken 70 about 70 or 80, I can't remember last time I counted, creatures, but it's a significant number of creatures from the FeyEarth system, but with stat blocks to use in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons.
Very cool. So D&D, obviously the most popular system out there, so it's easy to see why that makes sense from like any number of perspectives. So my question about that is, what were the challenges when converting these creatures to 5e from Feyearth?
Honestly, it wasn't easy. When it came to physical stats, the 6 ability scores, that wasn't too difficult, okay?
Yeah.
That really wasn't too hard. Working out armor class was a bit tricky because, and I don't want to go on a 5e D&D rant, the armor class mechanic is pretty awful, and it was hard to, because the way AC rules as written works is it's directly tied to the physical armor of a creature or target. But when you actually start looking at stat blocks of creatures and monsters, they might have an AC that's the equivalent of maybe mail armor or, I'm forgetting the names of different armor types in
Like
5e, but
leather armor or plate or
yeah,
scale or.
yeah. But there'd be nothing in the physical description of the creature that would indicate that they have a hide or a carapace or anything that would be the equivalent of that. So that was challenging, but I worked around it. Heavily basing it off dex modifiers as well, because so many fey creatures from European folklore, they don't have dense hides or carapace or natural armor, but they were lightning fast. So that makes them hard to hit, which should be reflected in the AC. The most challenging thing, however, was so many creatures from European folklore were so incredibly powerful that, like, if you take a fairy, for example, from European folklore and brought it into your 5e game and gave it all of the magical abilities that fairies were said to have in the original stories, a single fairy is easily TPKing any party under 12th level without breaking a sweat.
Sure.
That's the reality. People don't realize how terrifyingly powerful Fey and magical creatures were in the original folklore. And this isn't unique to Europe. If you look at North American, South American, African, Asian, it was the same all everywhere. Okay, so obviously, when giving these creatures magical abilities, I'm giving them magical abilities that are based on the abilities that were described in the original stories, in the original folklore, in the original legends. But I was trying to do that while working within the 5e spell list. That was the hardest thing. It was so challenging, and especially because I was finding a couple of examples of spells that were pretty good and kind of not perfect, but pretty damn close enough to what the original magical ability was. But then I'd go on a D&D Beyond or whatever to look up the spell description and realize, oh wait, legacy. Oh shit! They changed the spell description with their. I can't believe it's not sixth edition that they have now, and they completely like a great example was a spell called Contagion, which I was kind of using as a hexing cursing spell because in the OG version of Contagion, you did a bit of damage, but then you were able to inflict them with. You had a list of different abilities. You could inflict them with like you could blind them, you could maim them, you could paralyze them, you could wipe their memories, a whole bunch of different things. The new version of Contagion, you do 10d8 poison damage, and they have the poison condition. I'm like, seriously, like what the like? I want to swear right now. It's like so. As a consequence of that, if you do back Hidden Folk of the Feywild, you're not only getting a wonderful bestiary full of amazing art of incredible creatures from some of the oldest stories shared across Europe. You're also getting a chunk of new spells because I had to invent a whole bunch of new spells for abilities that appear in folklore, but there's nothing even close to them in your in 5e spell lists. And obviously I was trying to stick with the core spell list and not stuff that requires you to spend $50 on a supplementary book because that's how WotC makes all their money. I was trying to so as a result, I mean, currently there's about 6 or 7 new spells in this book.
Okay.
That could expand to a dozen or more. And these are things like Fairy Curse and stuff like that. These are like some really nice, nasty spells that are great to inflict on your players. So you're not just getting some incredibly authentic monsters that will feel more real than a lot of the stuff that you throw at your players. Because, as I said, these are creatures that weren't invented by somebody sitting in an office somewhere. These are stories that developed in cultures, some of which are over 1,000 years old.
Yeah.
And now I've also included spells using the 5e mechanics that mimic the abilities that they had in these centuries old stories.
So
but that was definitely the most challenging bit, the magic.
Yeah, I believe that. So 2 questions about that. The magic, the spells that are added to the book, are those just for monsters, or can players use those too?
that would be up to your DM.
Yeah, I suppose it would.
You know, I mean, I don't. That's not. I don't have a say on what happens at your table. You know. Um. So yeah, I mean, you could decide that this is something that any creature could have. If it was me, I would. It'd be something that I would have unique to the Fey creatures, with one or two exceptions. Like if the party are fighting a 1,000-year-old lich, oh yeah, maybe they know this spell because
Sure.
you know that would be. But like, do you want to give your? I mean, and some of the spells, certainly some of the less powerful spells, I would have no problem giving to somebody. Like, let's say a warlock with an archfey patron. Yeah, take some of these
Yeah.
spells and put them on that spell list. You know, these are perfect. These are literally. These are the most OG face spells you're going to find in a 5e game, you know? So
Yeah.
that would be a great example of where a player could maybe not immediately, but eventually gain some of these very powerful spells.
Okay. And like, you've got a lot of knowledge about the Fae from all the research you've done. How much of that are like, and we don't necessarily always get a lot of information in like 5e monster descriptions about like background about creatures. How much are you able to give to us in like a typical monster entry or creature entry?
I mean, let me think. Let me just okay. Let me just pull up my notes, if you will.
Absolutely.
So let's look at. Actually, here's a nice one. It's a small description, but I think quite detailed. And I did share artwork of this with you. This is the Nevriger, and to my Breton listeners, please excuse my butchering of the pronunciation. So the Nevriger or Wrecker, they were from French folklore, specifically from the Breton region of France.
Okay.
Okay, and so that's where they were from. Okay, hold on.
I've got the
Let me
artwork
just.
pulled up now.
Yeah, the artwork. It looks like a dwarf-like creature wearing fisherman's clothing with a glowing orb of fire beside their shoulder. Okay, so this is the description that you would get in the book. Nefriga Areker are a type of diminutive fae found in coastal areas. They are often said to be a type of Corrigan, which is a local term for a dwarf or hobgoblin-like fae. Very small in stature, they wear the kind of heavy clothing that is worn by fishermen to protect them from the elements. Able to create balls of flame, which they use like lanterns to lure ships toward the rocks so that they
Ah.
will be destroyed. The Nefergar are said to loot the ships of their cargo and also eat at the softest and most tender parts of the drowned sailors.
Oof.
They're quite a malevolent fae, having no care for the harm they do, eager to cause another ship to be wrecked so they can loot it of its cargo and feast on the bloated bodies of its drowned sailors. The Nefergar are a fully aquatic fae that can breathe water and swim with ease. So these ones I love because these are a somewhat unique example because they are a type of aquatic fae creature. They were only found in folklore regarding the coastal areas of Breton in the northwest of France. However, their magical abilities are all associated with fire, which is a lovely dichotomy, you know. This
Sure.
aquatic, water dwelling, marine fey creature that conjures up balls of flame. So, in terms of just briefly, the stat blocks for this creature, I gave them an AC of 15. They've got just over 100 hit points, so they're tough enough, but not crazy tough. Okay, they have a
Hmm.
strength of 12, not that high. They have a dex of 18, con and intelligence of 14, a wisdom of 18, and a charisma of 16. So good stats, okay? Immune to cold, immune to charm. And then their innate spellcasting abilities are dancing lights, control flames, firebolt cast at 5th level, so that's going to mess you up. Fire shield and hypnotic pattern. So
Yeah.
I was taking so in the folklore, in the French folklore that these came from, it describes them as I said, conjuring up balls of flame that sailors would think were lanterns to guide them safely to the shoreline and to port. They were actually guiding them to the rocks so their ships would be wrecked. the ship would sink, they could loot it of its cargo and feast on the tender flesh of the drowned sailors. So that is the description of them in the original folklore. So it's like, well, what fire-based spells in 5e align with that, which is why you've got your fire shield, your fire bolt, control flames, you got your hypnotic pattern. These are classic fire-based spells that you could totally see a creature using to lure and to hypnotize and enrapture.
And it kind of reminds me of like Legends. I mean, it's not exactly the same, but like there's the idea of like a will-o'-the-wisp that lures people into the swamp to drown. You know, it seems like a kind of similar idea there.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, he's a bit of a jerk, isn't he?
Oh, they're lovely, nasty fey creature to throw at your party, you know, because they're like, because of the complexity of them as well. As I said, like, I can't think of another. I honestly can't at the top of my head, and I'm no expert on 5e, but off the top of my head, I cannot think of another creature that can be chucking 5th level firebolts at you and then dive into the water and swim like a fish.
Yeah, I like
You
that.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice swim. Good. It had a good swim speed too. Like, what was it? What was it?
I mean,
like?
yeah, like 30 feet. Like, but also
Oh,
think
yeah,
about
yeah.
how much that's going to piss off the wizard in the party. The Neferger chucks a firebolt at him and says, "Oh, I can do you one better," and goes and chucks a fireball. And then, okay, well, I'm going to do I do my dexterity saving throw. Oh, I passed. I'm in the water. That does nothing. You know, I completely dodged your fireball. How? Because I'm underwater. That's how. Okay?
Yeah, it's nice. You know, that's a good way to definitely challenge a party there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's a question, and you know we've been seeing some of the great art that has been commissioned for Feywork. So a pretty big team of artists have created all the art there, right? So
Yeah, I've got 7 artists, I think. 6 artists on my team.
and
Um,
how much art are they created for FeyEarth and for Hidden Folk of the Feywild?
I'd need to check, but at the moment, I think so. Within Feyre, there's going to be about 100 or so, just over 100 creatures, and of those 100 or so creatures, I'm pretty sure we have artwork for at least 80 of them by now.
Okay,
Yeah, so incredible artwork done by amazing artists. No AI comes anywhere near my work
that's the
ever
way we like it. That's the way
in
we like it.
any capacity. So I have an incredible team of artists, and they are from. I have Hungary / Germany. One is I think she Venezuelan. I can't. Oh, Argentinian, Russian, um, Irish, Bulgarian, English. So like it's a real mix. Oh, Ukrainian as well. I had an incredible Ukrainian artist who did the artwork for most of the Slavic Fey creatures of Feyre. And this is the thing about Hidden Folk of the Feywild is like I'm trying to raise money basically so I can produce a physical copy of this book. If my crowdfunder fails, I'm not going to lose any sleep. This book will still be produced, but it will be produced in a digital format only. Because the simple fact of the matter is, this book isn't costing me anything as a designer to produce it, because all the artwork that's going into this book, I'm already commissioning on my budget for FeyEarth.
Right. And folks, you know, lest you think that that is like, you know, some kind of cop out, let me tell you this. I don't think there's a lot of indie projects out there that feature a lot of creatures that are going to have this much artwork. I can tell you for a fact that Skies of Fortune is not going to. So this is, you know, this is a good deal for you. You know, if you want some really, and you've been seeing what's been put up there so far. It is excellent stuff.
My art budget for FeyEarth, which is basically going to be 95% of what of that art budget will go into Invoke the Paywall, but my art budget for FeyEarth over 12,500 euros.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
raised
folks.
I raised 10,000 euros on Kickstarter for FeyEarth, and my art budget is over 12,500 euros.
So there you go. Those are the margins we're working with on the indie scene these days. Most of what a lot of times an indie creator will put a lot of their capital just into getting art for the books in order to sell the book so that you can then make your next project, right? So
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah,
it's
exactly. So that's the one thing with this, and it's great. I've other stuff relating to this project. So I had the chance of having a wonderful conversation with Emily Graymore. I'm pretty sure. She produced a wonderful game that came out there a little while ago. Actually, it had been out for ages, and she did a small Kickstarter to raise money so that she could do a physical copy of the book. Okay, The Cunning Folk. So
Cunning
similar
Folk,
themes
okay.
to what I do. Okay, and we were having a really great conversation, and she then made the brilliant suggestion, which I am doing, of, as I've already said, if my backer kit fails to hit funding, this book will still be produced, but it will only be produced in a digital format. So for all those people who bitch and moan about saying, "I'll refuse to pay that for a PDF," well, then you should have backed my backer kit.
Right.
It's that simple. You don't get to bitch and moan about the prices of PDF if you won't put your money into backing projects. But she made the wonderful suggestion, which is happening, that like the final PDF of this book will be retailing at somewhere between 20 and 30 euros, because like as I said, there's like over 10,000 euros worth of artwork in this book, and a decade of research into this book. It's even though it doesn't look like a big project, it's a significant project. So the PDF of the book, when it does come out, will be retailing somewhere between 20 and 30 euros, okay? But I will also be, Emily made the wonderful suggestion, producing much smaller zines,
Ooh.
selling somewhere between 5 and 8 euros, and these zines will be very type specific. So I already have one that I'm working on, and that one is basically all of the little creatures that you get. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm talking about is
Maybe like the
I
ones that
think
would be small size in D&D. Is that what we're talking about?
so we're talking things like your fairies, your brownies, kabooters, all of these small in size fae that you get, and that's got about, I think that zine's got about 12 creatures in it, and it's gonna have about at least 3 or 4 spells, and so that will be retailing at somewhere between 5 and 8 euros.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have another zine that's just forest fae, one that's swamp fae. I'm gonna have one that's just feminine fae creatures. So that so you've got all these different zines varying in price between 5 and 10 euros, with selections of creatures, or you could buy the PDF and for 20 whatever euros and get all of them.
Yeah. Sounds like a good deal to me. Either way you want to do it, maybe you're just interested in like the small ones or the swamp ones or the lady ones, something along those lines. I like that idea. I think maybe that would be good for sales at cons too. I think if someone just has like $5 to drop on you, or $5 or $10 to drop on you, that's a good deal. I like it.
I mean, like, yeah, and that's the thing. Like, let's say you've only got $5, and you're like, okay, well, for these $5, I got these 12 creatures. They're very diverse. They all fit this specific theme, and I've got a mixture of benign and helpful creatures, highly malevolent creatures, cunning creatures, tricksters. You'll have a diversity of creature types within the 10, 12, 15 creatures in this zine that you just paid $5-8 for, So you'll actually end up with quite a lot of stuff that you can use in your game. You're talking easily 5 or 6 or more different sessions worth of creature content for your players.
Yeah. Well, Neil, I was going to ask you to do something that I know you hate to do, but I think I'm going to spare you that. I was going to ask you to pick like 1 or 2 creatures to talk about, but the one of the ones that you sent me is what I want to talk about. Just I saw the name of it and I'm like, okay, I have to understand where this came from. So you got one. I'm pulling it up right now. It has a turtle shell, like a spiky Bowser turtle shell, a scorpion tail, like a sort of like a hairy like bear's feet, six of them, and then like a well, sort of a human face but with wolf ears, and it's called a Tarrasque.
That is the Tarask, and that is the thing about Hidden Folk of the Feywild. There is not many. There's about 3 or 4 creatures in this book that already have stat blocks in 5e that are completely bullshit stat blocks that were nothing but cultural appropriation by Gary Gygax in the 70s. Like, seriously, if these creatures had come from any other culture with a bit more melanin, he would have been straight up
Sure.
called a culturally appropriating racist, which you already know he was. But because it was European folklore, nobody gives a shit. What you were talking about is the Tarrasque, which is originally from French folklore. And they were, as you described, they were these giant creatures the size of an elephant with this armored spiked turtle shell on their back, a large scorpion tail, 6 legs, 3 pairs of legs ending in giant bear paws, and this large kind of Leonian-esque head that could swallow a man whole. Interestingly enough, with the Tarrasque, what made the Tarrasque so deadly was its poisonous breath. And this is a common
Ah.
trope that you get in a number of creatures from European folklore, poisonous breath. The Tarrasque from France has it, the Tatzelwurm from the Swiss and Bavarian Alps has it, even the Basilisk had it, okay? And so if somebody was fighting a Tarrasque, they would usually be killed long before they even got close to the creature because its poisonous breath was said to spread out for like a half a mile or a mile around it. So you would be dead before you even saw the creature, killed by the fumes of its poisonous breath. Some of the other creatures that will appear in Hidden Folk of the Feywild are the Banshee from Irish folklore. As
Mm.
an Irishman, I have always been offended by depictions of the Banshee because they're all complete bullshit. The Banshee was not an undead creature. The word banshee comes from 2 words in the Irish language, ban meaning woman and she meaning elf or fairy. It literally means fairy woman. They were a type of fairy or elf. They functioned as a messenger. If you saw the banshee and heard them wail, then that meant a family member of yours was going to die. They
Mm.
didn't cause the deaths, they were simply messengers of death. In some stories, it was only members of the royal families of Ireland that would die, but there's many local stories of farmers who would have seen a banshee and then they get home and a day later their mother or their father or their grandfather has died, you know? So I have the Tarrasque, the banshee. Another one I have is the goblin, because goblins in European folklore were so completely different to what you see in not just 5e, but in pretty much any high fantasy game. In your standard high fantasy game, goblins are these idiotic, cowardly cave dwellers. No. When you actually look at depictions of goblins in European folklore, they were extremely intelligent, highly cunning, extremely magically powerful, to the point where the term goblin wasn't just a name for these creatures, it became a synonym for any incredibly magically powerful and mischievous, cunning fairy.
You know, I'm looking at this guy right now. I've got him pulled up for the viewers. You know, he's wearing a top hat. He's got kind of a
Yeah,
nice green coat on. He's got, you know, leggings and buckled shoes. He's carrying a blue lantern and a cane. He looks like he wants to bust my union.
exactly. Like this is that is a classic goblin. Okay, you're so like I mean just to pull him up. For example, the goblin stat block that I have, their stats, they have a strength of 12, they have a dex of 20, a con of 12, an intelligence of 20, a wisdom of 16, and a charisma of 20.
Mm.
Okay? They have the evasion ability that rogues have. They have a magical mastery, meaning that when casting concentration spells, they do not need to concentrate. Their spell save DC is 16, and
Right.
their spell list: Guidance, Mage Hand, Mending, Message, Prestidigitation, Detect Magic, Magic Missile, cast at 6th level, Alter Self, Arcane Lock, Darkness, Enlarge, Reduce, Invisibility, Misty Step, Dispel Magic, Counterspell, also cast at 6th level, Bestow Curse, Fear, Haste, Remove Course, Hypnotic Pattern, Major Image, Fabricate, Phantasmal Killer, Animate Objects, Program Delusion, Project Image, and then once per day they can cast a Fey Boon, whereby you're basically gifted with a luck point, or a
Yeah.
fake curse, whereby you're basically just screwed. Okay,
Yeah.
so that is that now, and even still, I feel they are massively underpowered compared to the actual folklore that they came from. But as I said, I was limited in working with the 5th edition spell list. You know,
Right.
so they have a ton of, like, their number of spells. They've got, like, I think nearly 20 spells they can cast at will. Um, some of which are concentration, but they don't need to keep concentration. Um, and and some of them that you can upcast, like your magic missile and your counterspell, they're casting as a 6th level spell. So stat wise, they are the equivalent of a 14th, 15th level spellcaster ish.
Yeah.
Um, and a spell save DC is 16. Like, that's not met. Like, that's tough. Like, when you consider that your standard player has a spell save DC of, if they're really good, 14 or 15 is like amazing spell save DC for a player. But, and as I said, and even with all of that, I feel like I've underpowered them because of the limits I was under working within the spell list system of 5th edition.
Yeah, it makes sense. These guys, he definitely looks like he reminds me a little bit of like a high level creature like a Rakshasa or something like that in D&D.
Yeah,
If
yeah,
we're going to
exactly.
and there we could probably talk about some cultural appropriation there too, but that's a whole other thing. Yeah, not to be messed with. I think we maybe have Tolkien to blame for the way TTRPGs treat goblins these days.
I mean, look, I have a lot of respect for Professor Tolkien. He did amazing work. He really did. But certainly, the modern day depictions of goblins in high fantasy directly is coming from his work,
Yeah.
without question. Without question, it's coming from his work. Because if you go back even 40, 50 years before he published The Hobbit in 1930 something, I believe, and the Lord of the Rings books, he started publishing them in the. I know he started publishing them, I think, in the 40s, and then he stopped because World War II broke out. But, like, so if you go back 50, 60 years to, like, the stories of the Victorian era, the goblins in those stories are like the goblins that I'm describing. You know,
Yeah.
in, incredibly cunning, incredibly intelligent. They're not cowards. They're using their intellect to win their battles, as well as incredible magical abilities. In many stories of goblins, the stories of them describe them as being especially gifted at magics that, if we're using D&D mechanics, spells of illusion, spells of enchantment, spells of charm, so that's why I gave them things like, programmed illusion, major image, fear, bestow curse. Because when you read the stories of goblins, from a lot of it is like, the word goblins originally a French word, so they first started appearing in French folklore, but then expand out. As I said, the originally was a French word for a specific type of powerful, cunning, magically gifted fae that then became a synonym for powerful and mischievous fae. But yeah, so that's where I was going with those spells from the spell list.
Cool. Yeah, definitely sounds like we should be taking these Fae a bit more seriously than we have been.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, actually, so something I'm doing right now, we're still in the middle of recording. I'm not sure when this episode is going to come out, but hopefully around the start of September, I will be starting to stream a little mini campaign that I've done with a stupidly amazing cast of players. and it's going to be an 8 to 10 episode mini campaign, set in the Feywild.
Oh, cool.
In which you are going to meet a ton of creatures that are from this book.
Nice. And
Yeah, so,
when can we? You said about when, or can we expect that? Do you think? Or
hopefully early September.
okay,
I'm in the middle of editing. Okay.
okay,
I think we have the first I think 4 or 5 episodes recorded, and it's going to run to somewhere between 8 and 10 episodes. But one thing about my actual plays is I'm done with live. I had a weekly actual play campaign that I ran for 2 years live on Twitch that ended in January, and it was amazing, and it was a wonderful story, and my players, they laughed, I made them cry on stream. It was brilliant. But live streaming an actual play is such a hard job.
it is.
It's so stressful. So now everything that I produce for Twitch is pre-recorded. Now, what that means, however, is that everything I'm producing for Twitch is 100% accessible because it will come with perfect, 100% accurate captions.
Nice.
But that requires a lot of work in the post-editing section, which is where I'm at now, you know? It does require a lot of work especially because the overwhelming majority of auto-generated captioning software is racist. So if you do not speak with a British or North American accent, it does not understand what you're saying.
Ah, I had never considered that. It's probably true, though.
So a few months back, I had a lovely opportunity to run a 2-part one-shot with a wonderful bunch of players from the Euphoria Discord channel, okay?
Oh, yeah, I know them.
It's a great community, wonderful people, and we had 5 players, 6 including myself on the Twitch stream, okay? And I was using the auto-generated captions that Video Ninja will provide. Our 3 British players had perfect captions, and the 3 remaining players, including there was myself and a fellow Irish woman, and then we had a Maori from New Zealand. All 3 of us non-Brits, the captions were accurate about 70% of the time.
Ooh, that ain't good. That ain't good.
So as a consequence now, any content that I produce for Twitch will involve me going back and like it takes about 3 times the length of the video. So if it's 2 hours of content, it takes me 6 hours of editing.
Yeah. Sounds about right.
But please God, come September, I will have this wonderful mini series. And for those of our listeners who maybe are hard of hearing, or if you have friends who are hard of hearing and don't engage in actual plays, because unfortunately the overwhelming majority of actual plays do not bother with captions at all, good or bad, you can tell them this fun Feywild campaign will have captions, and actually you can tell them anything from the FeyEarth Twitch channel comes with captions.
Great. Glad to hear. I'll make sure to add that in the show notes too. So where can people go to find your crowdfund for Hidden Folk of the Feywild, Neil?
So I decided this time around to go backer kit instead of Kickstarter.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you just basically type in Hidden Folk of the Feywild into backer kit, it jumps straight up.
Cool. I'm gonna pop up one more visual here for people to see, just because I don't think I even got to all the ones that you sent me. It's just quite a few. Yeah. I'm putting the Leshy up there now. He's a cool looking tree bearded dude.
There's another great example. Okay, so and yet again, this is something that I've had to suffer with as an Irishman. Is so much of what people see about fairies and fae and magical creatures in popular media is complete bullshit. Like, it's complete like, classic example. As everybody knows, if you're dealing with any sort of fairies or fae, as long as you have some iron on you, you are perfectly safe. Everyone knows that, yeah? The fairies are vulnerable to iron. No, they're fucking not. The only cultures in which fairies and magical creatures were said to be vulnerable to Ireland was Ireland and Scotland. Nowhere else in Europe are there ever any descriptions of Fae being vulnerable to iron. Ever. But this is something, mostly because, and I'm not trying to be disparaging to your fellow countrymen and women, North American authors who are obsessed with Irish and Scottish culture, writing stories, fantasy, urban fantasy that involve Fae, use Irish and Scottish folklore as the basis for it, but write it in a way as to suggest that this is true of any magical creature from any culture.
Sure.
The Leshy is another great example of this. Most people, when they hear the word Leshy, they think of The Witcher.
Yeah.
The problem is, the Leshy in The Witcher is nothing at all like the actual Leshy from Slavic folklore. The Leshy from Slavic folklore was sometimes referred to as the godfather of the forest. They were essentially a demigod of the forest.
Okay.
They were so unbelievably powerful, okay? And generally quite benevolent. If you as a human were in the forest, but you're respectful to the forest, to the creatures of the forest, and to the trees and plants of the forest, the Leshy would aid you. Many stories of the Leshy aiding hunters who would live off the forest, because these hunters would hunt in a respectful fashion. You got some asshole duke or baron storming through with his pack of hunting hounds, being a dick, trashing the forest, destroying trees, harassing and harrying and killing all sorts of animals. The Leshy's going to do some pretty nasty shit to him because he's being an asshole, disrespecting their domain. But a farmer, a hunter, a local who was respectful, they were actually very. But yeah, and there's another example, benevolent creatures, effectively demigods. In brief, so the Leshy stat block, the Leshy in Hidden Folk of the Feywild has a strength of 29.
Oh my.
There you go. Okay, their Constitution 24.
Yeah. Yeah, that is.
Their lowest stat is a 16, and that's intelligence.
And that's draconic level powers there.
Yeah, I think I was looking it up, and I think the only creatures with a higher strength that you will find in the Monsters Manual was, is it the Storm Giant that's the most powerful? The Cloud Giant? I can't remember which one it is. That's most powerful.
Well, I don't remember. There's a lot of giants. I think it's the Storm Giant.
I think it's the Storm Giant has has a strength of 30, and I think there might be a Demon Prince, not Asmodeus, but one of the other ones. And obviously
Grazit or something.
Yeah, and obviously the Trask, but we don't give a shit about the D&D Trask because it's bullshit. I've never liked it. I've actually always hated the D&D Trask. I've always thought it's such a boring creature. It's it's the world-ending kaiju. I don't care. This is so boring. As a storyteller, I would never use a creature like that in any of my stories because it's so boring. But yeah, so to put in the context, there's I think 2 or 3 creatures that you'll find in the 5e Monsters Manual who are physically stronger than the Leshy. Because fun fact, the Leshy in the folklore, they could appear as short as a blade of grass or taller than the tallest and most ancient oak trees, and they could change their shape in a moment, in the blink of an eye.
Nice, yeah. So they were pretty much it could be any way that they felt they wanted to be in their domain. So
yeah, absolutely. And as I say, a creature that the Leshy's spell save DC is 20.
Okay. So is this? So let me just ask this: are they the most powerful creature in the book, or?
They're one of because the thing you have to understand is that when you're talking about creatures like this, this is a wonderful, really great question. But when you're talking about creatures like this, power has a different meaning. Because you could have a creature that's maybe on paper numerically not as powerful. It doesn't have as many hit points. It doesn't have a high DC, but they're so cunning and they're so intelligent or they're so crafty, and so the way they use their magic will mess you up in a way. A deific creature like a Leshy, who, as long as you're not being an asshole and you're respectful to the Force, is a really nice dude. You know,
Yeah.
like, as I said, their nickname, one of their names in the Slavic cultures that they come from was grandfather of the forest. You don't usually use the term grandfather to describe somebody who's an asshole, who's going to be going around and messing people up. It's generally quite a friendly and kind honorific. So in terms of sheer mechanics, yeah, the Leshy is definitely one of the most powerful. It's got 380 hit points. It's got an AC of 18. It's got a CR, a challenge rating. I know we all have opinions on the challenge rating mechanic of 5e. We won't go there.
Sure.
But
Sure.
it's got a CR of 18.
Okay.
Okay. Funnily enough, it is vulnerable to copper weapons.
Okay.
And we're going back to the folklore. If struck with a copper weapon, the Leshy randomly loses one of its magical abilities for 1d4 plus 1 rounds.
Oof.
If the hit is a critical hit, they will permanently lose one randomly selected magical ability for 24 hours.
Oh, wow.
because in the folklore, the one vulnerability that is described, literally the only vulnerability that Leshy had was a vulnerability to copper. And if they were struck by a hero with a copper weapon, they might fight them off and be able to save themselves.
And good, probably good luck finding like a magical copper weapon to deal,
it doesn't have to. No,
level.
For this thing, it doesn't have to be magical. It just needs to be made of copper.
No, I know, but like if you're a level like 18 or 19 party trying to fight one, you probably also want a magical weapon to go along with that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like that. Yeah. That's a custom. You're going to your local artificers for a custom job there. But yeah.
Yeah.
Now, funnily enough, the Leshy doesn't have a massive spell list. Because they aren't described as having a whole host of a wide range of magical abilities like the Goblin does. Okay.
Right.
The magical abilities they have are mostly associated with plants. So they've got things like plant growth, they can shape change, they've got cone of cold and plane shift and stuff like. Oh, they can awaken trees. Obviously they're going to be able to awaken a tree. So they don't have a huge spell list, but the stuff they have, it can mess you up. One actually fun and interesting thing is and this is yet again going into your question about powerful creatures.
Yeah.
I'd have to count, but off the top of my head, I can think of at least 6 creatures in this book that can cast greater invisibility at will.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So this is what I'm saying about how powerful a creature is. You can have some tiny little hobgoblin. Don't get me started on D&D hobgoblins. I could just rant for hours on all the things that are wrong with, because basically Gary Gygax got his hands on some sort of encyclopedia of European folklore in the 70s and copied down all the names that he thought sounded cool to use in D&D. That's literally what happened. He's even said this in random interviews, But going back to what you're saying about powerful creatures, you could have some diminutive little hobgoblin that's only got 40, 50 hit points, but they can cast greater invisibility, meaning they're blasting you with their witch bolts and their magic missiles or whatever, and there's nothing you can do because you can't see them.
Yeah.
Unless you happen to have somebody with a spell like True Sight or what's the Fairy Fire or one of them.
Yeah.
You're basically screwed. And quite a number of not all, but at least a couple of the creatures that have greater invisibility also have spells like Dispel Magic and Counterspell, meaning if you do a Fairy Fire and you got to cast it, actually I don't think so.
So folks, if you want some really challenging creatures, or you just want creatures that are true to European folklore, Hidden Folk of the Feywild and FeyEarth are for you.
I mean, like, I remember this idiot on Blue Sky commented on Hidden Folk saying, "Oh, I wouldn't back this because it's only European folklore. It can't. I won't back something that's so limited. You know, why haven't you included?" I was like, "I've spent 10 years researching to create this content that is specific to one continent that I'm a native of.
Yeah.
Who the fuck do you think you are bitching at me because I'm not including folklore of Asia or the Americas or Africa or Oceania? Like, seriously,
Yeah,
you know, like,
I've gotten a similar question often when it comes to the like historical pirates that I choose to include in Skies of Fortune. Some people say, well, why don't you include Madame Xi, who was like the biggest who had the biggest pirate fleet of all time? The
yeah,
simple
yeah,
answer is it's a question of scope. You know,
yeah,
it's like I've my setting is set around Europe and the Caribbean. It
yeah.
would be a huge task to include an entire another continent in the mix. So
And also like, but it's not just the geography of that. If you look at naval warfare of say 16th century Europe, the Caribbean, versus naval warfare of
hmm
like any dynasty of China, the boats were constructed completely differently.
hmm
They had completely different weapons and armaments on them, meaning that they were used martially in completely different ways.
yep,
You're not just sticking on another landmass here. It's basically an entire new system. I mean, look, I my hope is to expand the world of FeyEarth. I talking about it briefly now. It's still very much in progress, but I do have a very, very, very exciting project that, if the gods are smiling, will start on next year. And this is my first expansion of the FeyEarth world, and it is FeyEarth Africa. And I currently am putting together a team of writers and artists from Africa. I
oh
currently
cool,
have I currently have four writers: Zimbabwean, Cameroon, Nigeria, Uganda,
mm,
and a pair of artists. They're British artists. Although one was born in Nigeria but basically reared in Britain, and the other she
sure,
was born in Britain, but like she's ethnically Malay and West African. So like this is something that we're putting together. I'm hoping I'll have eventually a team of 5 to 6 writers and 5 to 6 artists from across all of sub-Saharan Africa, and we will be working on the first expansion of the FeyEarth universe into Africa in our world in the year 1872, which is the year that if you started playing FeyEarth tomorrow, you're playing in the year 1872 specifically, okay? And this
yeah,
is very important for Africa because this is about 20 years before the Berlin Conference, when all the European powers basically got a magic marker and started dividing up the continent. Okay, so this is pre colonization slash genocide.
right,
Okay, and this is a book. This expansion is going to be an expansion filled with all of the fae and magical creatures from sub-Saharan African folklore and mythology. We'll be including some new classes that aren't in the core FeyEarth system because their class, like the FeyEarth will finally have a bard class.
okay,
There's no bard class in FeyEarth because there was no such thing as bards in the 19th century in Europe. They didn't
right,
exist. But in African culture, there was a type of musician, poet, and storyteller. I'm not going to use the correct term because I will butcher the pronunciation. Okay,
yeah,
but it was found in numerous cultures. You find it in Zimbabwe, in Benin, in Yoruba. It was found all across. They were basically a bard. So we're going to have a bard class. The witch class is going to get an overall. Like, it's going to be amazing. And when we do that project, there is going to be a 5e supplement coming off that project too. Just like Hidden Folk of the Feywild is a 5e supplement of the FeyEarth core rulebook, there will be a supplement off of the FeyEarth Africa expansion.
Yeah.
So if you want, you can include a host of creatures, magical abilities, magical items in your 5e game that are coming directly from African folk. I'm on the project as the token white guy in the background who does all the maths. You know,
Sure,
like
sure.
my friends are giving me all of their beautiful stories from their cultures, and I'm like, okay, so mechanically, how do we fit this into the game? Like that's my job. Okay, I'm like the
Yeah.
token white guy project manager because my background, my day job is secondary school maths teacher, so that's what I'm good at. Okay, I'm good with numbers, so I'll be the only token white guy on the team doing the really boring bit of the maths behind the
Yeah.
scene.
No.
So they don't have to. But like in terms of expansions and dickheads criticizing me for producing some pretty incredible work based on 10 years of research that's only on European folklore. It's like, no, there are other projects that
Yeah.
you can expect from FeyEarth down the line that are like no, like the closest thing that anybody has done to this that I know of is the Wagadu setting for 5e that came out about was it 4 or 5 years ago, um, and that was a campaign setting, so a fantastical fictional campaign setting for fifth edition that was based around African folklore and culture.
Right.
Okay, and I followed the amazing Three Black Halflings over in the UK. They ran a campaign on that, so I was listening to their podcast of that, and it was very cool, very interesting classes and creatures and the like. And you could see the African influence, but what we'll be doing next year, if you're interested in what we're doing in FeyEarth, is no, it's not something based off. This is like no, this is literally Africa in 1872 in this alternate timeline.
Cool. Well, I'm looking forward to that, and maybe we can have some of your team on once you guys get closer to release. Would love that. And
At least
I'm
that definitely. Sorry to interrupt you. One of my teammates, who is originally from Zimbabwe, has been living in Ireland since she was 12, since they were
yeah.
12. So if they would be time zones wise, they'd be easy to get onto a chat.
Very cool. Very cool. That is great. I'm glad that there's more projects like this happening where people are bringing their own sort of underserved, under acknowledged cultures into the TTRPG sphere. I mean, I did a whole, well, me and a group of guests did a whole podcast on Round the Table about this, about non-European culture representation. So I guess check that out. I'll maybe put that in the show notes as well. We had like Adrian Mejia, who made Koboa, the South American 50 expansion, and Connor Alexander, who did Coyote and Crow, etc., etc. But I love these kind of
Yeah,
projects.
yeah, and like Coyote and Crow are just, oh my god, the stuff they're
Yeah,
producing is it's just unbelievable. They are they are some of the greatest content producers alive right now, as far as I'm concerned.
yeah.
What they're producing is just unbelievable. It's a game that I really want to play. I just physically there are not enough hours in the day.
I know that's the problem with being like into the indie scene, especially, is that it's an
Yeah.
ocean, not a pond. So you've got there's so much to do, and then you've got your own projects, your own actual plays. It's hard to find time to fit in all these games that you want to try.
But it's like as you're saying there, like non-white cultures are so horribly underrepresented. But even the term white culture, as a European, I have so much problems with because in the US, the term white culture means something completely different to what it means in Europe.
Sure.
Um, and when you a lot of the time, unfortunately, when you see people talking about their proud European heritage, they're usually ignorant neo Nazis who couldn't actually find Europe on a map of the world. Like that's just I'm talking facts here. So this is why projects like both FeyEarth and Hidden Folk of the Feywild have meant so much to me. I'm an Irishman. I come from one of come from a culture which has some of the most in-depth and some of the most richly preserved folklore in not just Europe but in the world. Okay, people
Yeah.
like our folklore. Like there are very few cultures across the planet that have preserved their folklore to the extent that the Irish did. Part of that was stubbornness because of 800 years of British genocide and occupation, but part of it was because of the fact that we're a nation of storytellers. So this, I've grown up in a culture where I was surrounded by stories that were like literally in primary school we were learning about the myths and legends of the ancient Irish Celts. It was on the official curriculum.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
So you're learning about
So
Cuchulainn and all those folks
yeah,
back then.
I was reading the stories of Cuchulainn and Fionn McCool and the Salmon of Knowledge when I was 8 years old.
Yeah.
In primary school class. It was on the curriculum, you know? So it's always been so which is why then I've always gotten so angry and frustrated when I see people taking things from European cultures, from European folklore, into their fantasy, into their stories, and it's completely wrong. It's completely bullshit. I'm like, seriously, if you'd even gone to the Wikipedia article, it would be better than what you've produced, you know? I mean, we give out about Wikipedia all the time, but it's actually not a terrible source, you know? And in fact, for a lot of the research I've been doing for these projects, the first thing I would do is go onto the wiki page and then scroll down to the bottom and see the references. You
Yeah.
know, great place to get source material. But so this is why this has been so important for me because it's like I'm sharing stories of European folklore with the world because I want to share stories that are hundreds, in some cases, nearly thousands of years old that were shared for so long by so many people, passed down from grandparents to their grandkids. And one thing that I found fascinating that I've realized when you study folklore, what makes folklore distinct from mythology? When you read mythology, you get to learn about kings and queens and princes and senators and
Aha.
governments and war and all of this high level stuff that goes on within a culture.
Like the one
But when
percenter stuff, you know?
Yeah, exactly. But when you start studying folklore, the stories in folklore are not about kings and queens. You get the occasional fairy tale about a prince or a princess, but even in those contexts, the characters in those stories, they're the farmers, they're the fishermen, they're the housewives, they're the cobblers. They're the everyday people who lived in these cultures. And you get an insight into life in times past that you don't get in mythology ever. If you're reading the stories of Achilles, you're not learning what it was like to be a hoplite in a
Sure.
Bronze Age army, you know? Whereas if you're, I don't know, reading one of the stories from Madame d'Aubry, who was a French folklorist, you're learning about what it was like if you were a farmer or a fisherman or a blacksmith in 13th, 14th, 15th century France. And 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 that's a big part of why this work is so important to me. It's like, no, this is the actual history. These are the actual people, you know. That's why I want to tell these stories. And that's why on a on a more on a more easygoing and superficial level, when you look at stat blocks for the creatures in my game and you suddenly bring them in and you're throwing these creatures at your players, it hits different. You know, like even in our mini campaign that we're playing, my players who are very experienced players are brilliant, wonderful. I'm just so stupidly lucky with the incredible players I have at my table. It's
Mm.
unbelievable. It's a dream. But they're loving every minute of this because every creature that I'm throwing at them is something that they have never before experienced in their fifth edition Dungeons and Dragons game. Because these are creatures that were not invented by me in the 21st century. These are creatures that are hundreds of years old.
Very cool. Well, folks, I mean, Neil, I love all your passion for the Fae. I love that you've taken on all this, you've done all this research about them and brought them back to us to like enjoy. I really think that folks out there should check out Hidden Folk of the Feywild if you want something for your D&D game, or FeyEarth if you want to try a new setting too. Did you have anything before we stop for the day? Do you have anything else that you would like to leave the people with?
I could talk about this for another 4 hours if you'd let me. All I'd say is, if this interests you, if you like stories about the Fae, if you are a DM and you want to run a game in the Feywild, or if you're a DM and you just want to bring in a couple of extremely magically powerful creatures to mess with your players, Hidden Folk of the Feywild is the perfect accessory for you. I cannot emphasize this enough, okay? On the backer kit campaign, it's very, very simple. You've got for $20, you've got the PDF, and then for $30, a physical copy of the book, and you'll get the PDF. Okay, this is not going to break the bank, people.
Yeah.
And as I say, you've got everything you need for an entire Feywild campaign, or for a handful of really wonderful, magically powerful creatures. Or, I mean, there's some terrifying monsters in this as well. We didn't even
Yeah.
talk about the giant man-eating housefly with a stinger tail from
Oh,
Italian folk.
let me pull that one up real quick.
Yeah, the Musca Macada, arguably the most terrifying creature I've used in FeyEarth. A giant housefly the size of a golden retriever with a mouthful of razor sharp teeth and a long barbed stinger tail, that were how they worked was that you would swarms of them would be magically locked inside chests to protect the treasures. So when you open the chest, a swarm of these monstrous creatures suddenly comes out and can wipe out an entire town. So like, I not just intelligent creatures. There's a couple of very nasty beasts in there. Your Tarrasque, your Tatzelverm, your Muscamacadas as well. But as I said, like, you have so much that you can choose from this. You also have some really fun spells that you can, even if you don't want to use the Fate, just the spells, really mess with your players as well. And it'll just bring this level of authenticity to your game, that we sometimes don't have the opportunity to have. Not that GMs aren't amazing. GMs are wonderful, incredible, creative storytellers, but you're working with the materials that you have. And as I said, these creatures just hit different because they weren't made up by some random nerd sitting in front of his computer. They're stories that were shared around fireplaces for hundreds of years. So it's a lot of fun to bring to the table.
Yeah. All right. I'm looking forward to it personally. I was a backer of FeyEarth myself, so I can tell you that it's good stuff. I think, yeah, just check out Hidden Folk of the Feywild. Everything you need to check out that and FeyEarth are going to be in the show notes, folks. Thank you for being here today, Neil. It was a fascinating discussion about the Fey, and I always enjoy having you on these.
Thank you for having me, and for folks who are interested, just make sure you're following me on Blue Sky. That's where you will get updates on any publications of zines from this work, as well as actual. I'm currently pre-recording 3 separate actual plays right now.
Yeah.
Okay, 3 separate actual plays. One which is kind of an Alice Through the Looking Glass themed game. The other is my Dungeons and Dragons Feywild campaign, and then the last is the one I'm actually probably the most, from an actual play perspective, the most excited about. But that one won't be coming out until probably November because the scheduling gods have been a shower of bastards. But it's it's FeyEarth game, all witches party, based off of the Marvel TV series Agatha all along.
Oh, cool.
And that one, all of my tables I have are incredible, but that one has the most ridiculous players. I have the offensively talented artist Erin Angelino, the incredible cosplayer Ren, Taya Campbell over from the
Ooh.
Damsels in Distress. It's just a ridiculous table of players that I have in this one game. Um, on a quest to find the hut of the Baba Yaga. So follow me on Blue Sky. There are going to be notifications over the next couple of months of various actual plays coming out on my Twitch channel as well as of course backing my backer kits and going over to my itch.io page for zines and so forth.
All right. So thank you, Neil. I guess we will see you on the Witches Road here then in November.
Yes.
Okay. Have a good one, everybody.